Hi, this is Graham Allen, and I am responding to a thread that's been going around the vinyl community for some time now about 10 most listened to albums. And I know people have done this in various different ways. Is it overall that the albums that you've listened to the most, and it's quite hard to know exactly what those 10 will be. So what I've done, I've split the 10 albums between 7 that I absolutely know that I've listened to an enormous amount over 46 years of buying records. And I'm going to say now, quite a few of those are going to be big live albums. And that's the reason for that is I always really enjoyed, particularly in the 70s, the live albums, which would often be doubles or even triples that I'm going to show. And in a way, were often a kind of greatest hits. The kind of music I like, which is progressive rock and jazz fusion, the bands will often enhance the studio tracks by playing them live. And so in many occasions, I got the live albums initially, and then sometimes was a little bit disappointed by the studio tracks when I bought the studio versions. And then I'm going to show 3 albums that I bought recently and I've played a hell of a lot in the last sort of 2 or 3 months. I'm sure everyone knows that, where you buy something quite recently and it's almost just on rotation. And that sort of gets into your head. And so when I think about the albums that I've played the most, although it's inaccurate, I start thinking of albums immediately that I've been playing an awful lot. Anyway, just to get straight on with it, and in no particular order, let's start with a real bang. So, Yes Songs, 1973, Treble Live Yes album. I loved the packaging on this. People will probably know, Roger Dean cover, sleeve, treble, fold out, wonderful pictures. I love the back there. And this was on the Close to the Edge tour 1973 with Alan White taking over on drums from Bill Bruford, although Bill Bruford is featured on this album on a couple of tracks from the previous tour. And I just think it's absolutely remarkable that Alan White allegedly in about 4 or 5 days learned the whole of the set, which was very complex, including the whole of Close to the Edge. And it's a fantastic version on here. In keeping with another album I'm going to mention, probably not the best recording sonically, but it captures a time and an excitement. And I personally think you can't beat that. I'd rather have not the best sonic album, but a really electric performance. Sometimes now you get these pristine soundboard recordings for live albums and they mix in the audience. And I do think often they can sound very clinical and flat. So for me, I like to go back to some of these live albums that were recorded often in stadiums, so they're a bit boomy, etc. But really, really great album. So listen to that a lot. Yes Songs, 1973. Okay, then we have Genesis, Seconds Out, very well-known album, a very loved album. This was just a fantastic early introduction to Genesis. I love the setup with the double drummers, Phil Collins and Chester Thompson. Wonderful gatefold pictures that I used to pore over. And just again, a great sort of set list at the time. Interestingly, Bill Bruford is also featured on this, on the cinema show, because he was touring before Chester Thompson came into the band and played a tour with Genesis. Didn't stay long, but really great performances. Steve Hackett, of course, is on this, as well as Mike Rutherford and Tony Banks. I loved that cover with the aircraft landing lights that Genesis was starting to use and pioneer. So great album. Played this many times. and a great representation of a late 70s live progressive rock album. Okay, a bit of a left turn now. I love jazz fusion, and this is an absolute classic. Billy Cobham, Spectrum. He's always been a favourite drummer. I don't think he ever bettered this album. It's a wonderful mix of jazz, fusion, funk, a little bit of sort of soul in there, and rock as well. He has Tommy Bolin of Deep Purple fame on guitar. That was a really left field wonderful choice to add a really rocky tone to this, but it's groundbreaking really. Big open sounding Fibes kit, double kit, wonderful double bass drum work. The opening track, Quadrant 4, is seminal in drum history because it has a really up-tempo double bass drum shuffle, which was very unusual back then at high pace. Wonderful keyboard playing from Jan Hammer on this as well, and rock solid Leyland Sklar on bass. He plays the very slippery bass line on Stratus, which has been sampled a number of times by hip hop artists. Billy Cobham, Spectrum, just a great album to have. Played many, many times. Slightly similar ilk. One of my all-time favourite musicians, Jaco Pastorius. This is his debut album. This is a repress from not that long ago. Just an incredible debut album. Really just grabs hold of you straight away with the incredible Donna Lee played on solo fretless bass and conga drums. So very stark, just superb track though. Jaco playing at high velocity. Wonderful feel on this album. There's soul, there's funk, R&B, sort of almost world music, new agey at one point. And then a beautiful melancholy, just solo piano piece at the end called Forgotten Love, which just establishes Jaco as a wonderful, wonderful composer. And recently, I think his stock has risen so much as a jazz composer. As a debut album, Pat Metheny just said this was one of the best. It just sort of hit you straight between the eyes. It really set the bar for bass playing as well. So the wonderful Jaco Pastorius debut album on Epic, astonishing album for any bass player. Okay, and now this album from 1982, people will probably know, Asia, which was a supergroup that was expected to really not do at all well, be kind of boring, new progressive rock supergroup that the critics would hate. They did hate them, but this album sold in the bucket load in 1982 on the back of the single Heat of the Moment and Only Time Will Tell. And it's a very intriguing, beautifully put together album with Steve Howe, Carl Palmer, John Wetton and Jeff Downes. So Jeff Downes adds a kind of modern computer keyboard sound to it. Steve Howe has his yes touches, really distinctive guitar. Carl Palmer paired right back on his drumming style to create a more groove-orientated drum pattern to his playing. And it really established John Wetton, who'd already been frontman in UK and had done a solo album, but soaring vocals, rock-solid bass playing, great songwriting, sort of Athena rock, but with prog touches, was kind of perfect for 1982. And it just sold in the millions, particularly in the States, but also in the UK and across Europe. So that's Asia. I saw them live on this tour at Wembley in 1982, and it was a fantastic concert. Got backstage to meet Steve Howe and Jeff Downes, although I wanted to meet Carl Palmer and John Wetton actually. But really wonderful album, great artwork, Roger Dean. It's on the Geffen label. Really superb album. I played this a lot when it came out. Great album. The first album I ever bought in late 1977 Was pictures at an exhibition by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. This is my original copy. Paid £2.25 for it. It's a long time ago, although it was a budget album. I just love this. Very, very dynamic, keyboard dominated album, recorded live at the Newcastle City Hall in March 1971. Came out as a single album, and it's just so dynamic. The sound is terrific. Greg Lake plays some wonderful bass and of course acoustic guitar on here. Beautiful ballad, The Sage, and Carl Palmer is absolutely on fire on this album. Really, really fast, hyperkinetic drumming. It really is, from start to finish, just a tour de force. And that was my introduction to Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and I never look back. Great cover. There's the pictures from the art gallery. Really, really wonderful. On the Manticore, so it's a reissue this. It would have been sort of mid-70s reissue. Originally came out on the Island label. Okay, staying with 1970s prog. Love this album. Camel, Rain Dances. Tends to get a bit missed, so Mood Madness is often the one that people cite as a favourite. This is 1977 and is a little bit jazzier, so it just has a bit of a nod towards jazz fusion, which would of course just been peaking around about mid-70s. A lot of people were getting on the sort of jazz fusion bandwagon, and I think it influenced quite a few of the prog acts as well. So Yes had Relaya, which was partly influenced by jazz fusion, and Camel had Rain Dances. They brought in Richard Sinclair on bass and vocals, which was a great move. He's a phenomenal bass player and singer on this. It's lovely, lush, progressive rock. It's quite light at times and jazzy, and has got some great mini Moog playing for people that like Moog synths. Great keyboard work, which kind of dominates, but Andy Latimer pulls off some incredible melodic guitar solos. He's often compared to David Gilmour, of course, his tone, and really wonderful, bustling, busy drumming by Andy Ward, an overlooked progressive rock drummer with a lovely jazzy touch. Great playing in odd meters. So this is a wonderful album. Rain Dances from 1977, yeah, just terrific album. Okay, then this is probably the album that I've played the most. It's my original copy. I've got another copy. This one's a bit battered. Welcome back, my friends, to The Show That Never Ends. Ladies and gentlemen, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. So, huge, sprawling treble live album on the Brain Salad Surgery tour. The versions of most of the tracks on here just enhance on the original studio albums, particularly Tarkus, which is phenomenal on here, and I'd argue Carnival 9 as well. Has an exceptional Carl Palmer drum solo slotted into Carnival 9. There's piano improvisations by Keith Emerson, so just acoustic piano. There's some wonderful Greg Lake acoustic pieces, just him and his guitar. And there's just some incredible bombastic playing as well, Toccata and Hoedown. And I always love the picture on the back with the band there. I just used to pore over that picture, look at all the keyboards, the gigantic 2.5 ton drum kit. And I thought it was interesting here how far apart they were from each other on stage. Sort of captured them a bit, really. I often thought quite sort of individualistic. Name of the band, of course, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, sort of separate. And sometimes that was a criticism, that they're kind of trying to outdo each other a little bit, almost like athletes. But of course, it added to the magic at times as well. So this was 1974 on the Manticore label. Wonderful album. I won't open it up because it's a little bit delicate inside some of these albums. But it opens up into ELP. It's a great package, really, really wonderful. Again, a bit like Yes Songs, the sonics are not the best. Sounds a bit sort of boomy. It was recorded in Anaheim, convention centre, and it's a bit boomy, but the performance is off the scale, absolutely phenomenal. So those are 7 albums that I know I've definitely played a huge amount. And I just wanted to mention, 2 more albums that I've been playing recently to make it up to 10, I should say. And these are really from trips abroad. I've been looking for some German progressive rock over the last 12 months. And sometimes it's quite interesting how, what is krautrock, what is progressive rock from Germany. The two kind of overlap, but 2 albums that are really distinctive. One, and I've mentioned these on a previous video, is a band called Schick Fürs Frühling, SFF, Symphonic Pictures. This is a trio. I love my keyboard trios. And it's sort of symphonic progressive rock, as you'd kind of expect. But it can just sort of has a bit of a jazz fusion hint as well, which I really like. But very, very good. Only discovered them fairly recently, and they're from Germany, and that's SFF, or Schick Fürs Frühling, Symphonic Pictures. And I could tell as soon as I saw this I was probably going to be interested. We've got a picture of the 3 of them. Again, Hammond organ, mini Moog. I'm gonna be happy with that. Really, really good. And then the last one has just arrived actually, and I've bought the whole of their catalogue, which is actually only 2 albums plus a live CD. And this is Tritonus. This is pretty obscure stuff. It's a keyboard trio again, and they really do try and sound like Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Very influenced by ELP, as were Trace and Triumvirate, also from Germany, Tracer from the Netherlands. It's interesting that they all begin with TR. But this is just great. It's the writing isn't the strongest, and it's a little bit copycat. So you've got kind of like an acoustic sort of track, almost as though they're trying to think what would Emerson, Lake and Palmer have done. This came out in '77, so in some ways I think there was a bit of a gap, because Emerson, Lake and Palmer had been away for 2.5 years in the mid-70s. They did come back with the Works album. But I think a lot of these bands, Triumvirate, Tritonus and Trace, were kind of filling a gap with very symphonic keyboard-based albums. So delighted to get this. And I've got the other album as well, and in fact I'm just waiting for a live CD to arrive as well. So that's all three albums. So they weren't around for long. 1977, this is the album, but just great seeing them there, set up, bass, drums, keyboards, Tritonus. Hard to get this. It was expensive, but I was absolutely delighted to get it, and it's on the A Canter German label. The band were from Mannheim, so delighted to get that. Tritonus, another keyboard trio, very, very ELP influenced. Okay, that's my 10 albums. Hope you enjoyed this, and speak to you soon.